So as always, you need yourself a nice space that doesn't need to be terribly aesthetic. You can have a rug on the floor. You will need a yoga mat at some point if we get upright, but we won't tend to be very strenuous. So be toasty warm. I've got my blanket wrapped around my hips. I often find that it's nice to keep the midriff warm, and there is some I don't know exactly if it's qigong or Chinese medicine or whatever what it is, but keeping the adrenals and the kidneys warm is supposed to be quite helpful in that kind of immune boosting kind of way, or at least immune protective, and especially if our allostatic load is high. Your allostatic load is all the stressors on the body and on the mind, life stressors, illness, injuries, maybe dodgy food choices, all of that adds to our allostatic load, and that depletes the system. So all these little teeny tiny things we can do to help our system feel kind of minded is beneficial. So for me, one of those things is that if I'm feeling a bit kind of tired or a bit chilly, to wrap something around my waist can be very pleasant. I would invite you, despite the fact that I'm upright, to lie down. And I would invite you to lie down upon your back. And I would also invite you to lie down upon your back with your knees bent. However, as I say, these are invitations. And if that doesn't suit you right now, we might want to be in a different position to begin with. Or maybe you're happy on your back with your knees bent. And the next invitation is to check in and see if you want your eyes open or closed. It can be kind of interesting to spend a bit of time looking around the room we're in especially when we land in a different position, allow ourselves to orientate where we're at. It's new vista, new perspective. And if you notice anything like cobwebs or peeling paint, could you give yourself a break from analyzing what needs to happen with the cobwebs and the peeling paint, and instead try and look at these familiar-ish things with a sense of objective interest. So if you had no level of value that you place on cobwebs and peeling paint, nobody had ever told you they were a bad thing or something that needed to be dealt with, maybe there's no problem. But there's always something in most of our lives, most of our surroundings that we would like to change, or we're thinking of doing something to. Just take them in very differently. Notice their texture of what you're looking at. Notice the color, the angles, the patterns, movement, if there's movement, or contrast against whatever it's next to or in front of. Shadows, maybe. And just notice what it does to your nervous system to just check out some little detail in your surroundings and look at it as if it is something kind of interesting. Like if you've picked up an interesting stone on the beach and you're just turning it over in your hands to look at it. And then if you fancy, feel free to close your eyes. Or you can do it again to another bit, another something in your room. Noticing what you notice. Taking time to take it in and see it afresh. And if your eyes are closed, bringing the same kind of attention to your body. Noticing maybe, I don't know, your feet or your hands or something that you don't have a lot of judgment around, or that you don't spend a lot of time wishing was different. And tune into the sensations arising in whatever bit of your body you're paying attention to. In much the same way as if you were to pick up a stone on a beach and turn it over in your hands and just look at its texture and color and notice its smoothness and patterns. Do the same with maybe your hands or your feet. And you can even do that visually. It's quite an interesting thing, an interesting meditation, to actually take one of your hands and look at it visually in as much detail as you can. And then wherever in your body you're attending to, could you now move, if necessary, your attention to your hands? And pour all your awareness into the sensations in your hands. Notice sensations arising from the outside, maybe the touch of whatever the hands are resting on. Maybe the temperature of the air. And then see if you can become aware of sensations arising from within your hands. So tingles and pulses and whatnot. And then take your hands and begin to stroke one hand with the other hand. So decide which hand is doing the stroking and which hand is doing the receiving. And use touch to investigate your hands in the same way, again, like you might turn over a stone on the beach and just get to know it through touch. A lot of nerve endings in your hands. You could consider that you're kind of mapping the ends of your nervous system while also getting to know the textures, the bumpy bits, the soft bits, the wrinkly bits, the smooth bits, the knobbly bits. And notice which hand has most sensation. So is it the hand that's being touched that is detecting the touch? Is that the one that's got the most experience? Or is it the hand that's doing the touch that's got the most interest and feedback? And the likelihood is that the hand that's doing the touching is sending most information to your brain. See if you can challenge yourself now to, as much as possible, notice the sensation of the hand receiving. So if you were to imagine that the hand that's doing the touching was your friendly massage therapist, and you were just noticing being touched. And that's really tricky, but do your best. I find it helps if I touch with a different part of my hand. So if you're using the fingertips, they're so innervated that it's very hard to do anything but feel the hand that's doing the investigating, using maybe the back of your hand or the sides to try and transfer your attention into what it's like to be touched, what the hand that's being touched experiences. Just notice the level of meditative attention that you can engender from doing something simple but complex. And how does that make you feel in your nervous system, your energy, your mood, your breath? And then we'll just turn that into a more general movement of the arms. So if you can allow your hands to stroke your arms all the way from the hands up through the arms towards the shoulders and armpits. And maybe you have to bring the arms up into the air to make that happen, which would be great because we're just going to segue this into a little warm up. So at some point when you've gotten the hands of traveled through the arms to the armpits, we're going to let the arms go free up to the ceiling and rotate your wrists so that you're kind of circling your fingers, or if you prefer to make gentle fists, you can, circling them in the air. And notice still the experience of the hands. They're wafting through maybe slightly different temperature air. And notice the experience of the skin down the whole length of your arms, the muscles too, moving as you articulate your wrists. And then I always, you are doing this, take your arms overhead and let them drape on the floor. And if a yawn happens, let it happen, and reach a little further through your right arm so the right arm gets a little longer. And then reach a little longer through the left arm. And all of this is very gentle and pleasurable rather than trying to stretch a certain distance. And keep alternating the arms as if your arms are going for a little walk above your head, or they're plucking some fruit from a tree, happens to be above the head there. And notice how that affects the more distant parts from the actual movement. So how is it affecting the hips, all along the trunk? Might even be creating movement in the feet and knees, all interconnected, noticing some subtleties as well as the more obvious sensations. And then relax that by letting your arms drape, maybe more of a sort of cactus shape beside your head so that the elbows are a bit more bent. Now, if your shoulders are very mobile in terms of that elevated position, you might be fine to leave them draped beside your head. But for me, just to really feel a bit of weight in the elbows, it's easier for me to have them in that cactus position. And then we're going to just waft the knees side to side. And they don't have to go far, and the feet stay on the floor. And the feet preferably maintain their distance from one another. We don't stack in this moment. We're not stacking one foot on top of the other, unless keeping the feet apart causes some pull in your sacroiliac joints or your hips or your lower back, in which case it might be better to stack the feet and knees on top of one another and not to be so asymmetrical. If you're able to keep those feet apart, your legs will be taking a sort of scissors motion Excuse me. And then when you're ready, come back to center with that. And doing whatever you fancy with your arms, they can be any way you like. Take your legs out long. And flex your ankles so your toes are reaching up towards the ceiling. And imagine you're growing your right leg long, like it's sliding down the mat. Or you might imagine you're trying to put your footprint on the wall beyond your feet, your right footprint. And then slide the left heel down the mat. The toes are still pointing up to the ceiling. And imagine you're trying to put a footprint of the left foot on the wall and alternate. So if you've got lower back tension, you want to keep this to a minimum so you're not doing really major asymmetrical movement in the pelvis. But you just go to the level that feels kind of nice and don't go to the level that feels slightly spooky. Learning what feels slightly spooky is a bit of a learning curve, because we're kind of indoctrinated into no pain, no gain, and that things are supposed to feel intense when we're trying to heal something or make it perform better. Actually, when it comes to certain things like our joints and our discs and our vertebrae, intensity is really not what we need. So having that little walk of the feet alternating long and short, really what's happening is that the pelvis is moving. And then let your legs go completely limp, and they may have been more muscularly engaged than you realized. And when you let them go limp, you recognize how much work they were doing, especially if you had really kept those toes curled up to the ceiling. In order to find a really good position for your feet for semi-supine or lying with the knees bent, there's a little trick that can be a bit weird. It may scrumple up your mat a little bit, but give it a go. The idea is that rather than picking up the leg and plonking the foot down, you let the toes of the knee roll out to the side and you slide the outer edge of the foot up the mat. And then there comes a natural moment where the sole of the foot just rolls in onto the floor. And then do the same with the other leg. So the knee and toes fall out to the side slightly. The outer edge of the foot slides up the mat or the floor and you roll in. And usually that gives you the optimal position of your feet for you, for your structure. You can also do it with two legs at a time. Just if you want to feel that, you can go the legs out long again. And then do the two legs out to the side and rolling them in. As I say, gets a bit complicated with the yoga mat sometimes. It's easier to learn to do that on the floor without a mat. And just notice if you have managed to do that movement, where is the placement of your feet? How solid do you feel? How neutral do you feel? And then we're going to just allow the lower back to touch the floor. So a little tuck of the tail. And then we're going to reach the tail away from us to arch the spine. And exhaling, we're tucking the tail up towards the nose. The lower back touches the floor. Inhaling, imagine you're laying your tail down between your feet. Gentle arch comes in the lower back. Exhale to curl. So this is arch and flatten, which probably used to by now. And we're keeping the bum on the floor the whole time. Nice and easy. We don't need to engage the thighs or the buttocks much at all. Just the range of motion that's created actually by the movement and contraction of your abdominal muscles and your lower back muscles, rather than working with the legs. Finding the breath so that it takes as long as it takes to inhale to finish that arching movement. And it takes as long as it takes to exhale to finish the flattening movement. And as you continue for another 6 breaths, could you try to really feel the breath in your nostrils? You can probably detect it easily on the inhale because it's cooler than the skin of your nostrils. And on the exhale, it's probably harder to detect because it's the same temperature as your body. But trying to detect it is another way that we can simply meditate. Something subtle, simple, but difficult. Feel the caress of the breath in the nostrils, on the inhale and on the exhale. You may never manage to feel that, but try. On the exhale, you may never manage to feel it. And then when you're ready, come back to neutral and connect with the breath still in the nostrils. And could you imagine for a moment what it would be like if you stepped out into an icy circumstance, into a frosty day, and you breathed fast and deep through your nose? You would literally physically feel the coldness traveling up the nostrils to the sinuses, down the throat and into the lungs, and right out into the extreme edges of the lungs, into the bronchioli. So could you imagine that sensation, and then trace your inhale as if you could physically feel the cold all the way to the very cells of your lungs. From the nostrils up to the sinuses, down the throat, branching out to each lung and into the teeny tiny cells like the broccoli, an upside down broccoli tree. And on the exhale, could you imagine that you can trace the breath in the reverse from the broccoli or the bronchioli, tiny cells, through to the larger passageways in the lungs, leading to the center of the chest, up through the trachea and across the sinuses and down the nostrils. We're really focusing today on some breathing practices and meditation practices that are simple enough to get your attention, aiming to reduce our allostatic load through breathing and simple meditation techniques. And we're going to take the right knee up into our tummy now, holding either the back of the thigh or your knee, and returning to the breath. And when you've got the breath back, extending the left leg long. And again, you may have lost the breath just through that one movement, and try and return to it again. And as you breathe, can you imagine the left leg sliding longer like we did before, but this time with the foot relaxed? And as you breathe, could you allow the right thigh to settle towards your right ribs, with the knee slightly towards the shoulder rather than towards the chest or the collarbones, a slight outward trajectory of the knee, the right knee. Just feeling where you feel that across the front of the hip, the thigh, the abdomen, the buttock, the hamstrings. And if it's available to you, hold the back of the knee instead of the knee itself if you were holding a knee. And take that foot vertically up, the right foot vertically up over your knee as if you're standing on the ceiling, into half happy baby. That's the one. And it should feel a bit like a squat, but try and avoid any sense of impingement, pressure in the hip. It should be a sort of general feeling in the hip rather than one spot of pressure. And then if you have it in you, to hold the leg with only the right hand and take the right leg straight but out to the right. maybe draping your left arm onto the floor to the left. And try not to roll towards the right side. So really keep your left buttock just as firm on the floor as it was before you did this move. And don't forget to breathe. And then take that same leg up to vertical, bend it a little, and hold the knee in your left hand. Bring your left hand to the outside of the right knee. You can drape your right hand on the floor and draw that leg over towards the left without the left toes rolling out to the left. So it's mid-air, a little cross there. Don't get to the floor. I want you to feel like you're still anchored through the back of the pelvis, the left and right side of the back of the pelvis. And if it's not too much, and it might be quite a big ask to do this, straighten the right leg a bit more. Breathing. So you're not in a twist. Your chest is facing the ceiling. Your pelvis is facing the ceiling. We will be twisting any second now, but breathing here for a moment, feeling into the outer right thigh, hip, and buttock. And then bend your right knee and let your heel or your foot gently settle onto your left thigh. And then take your two legs over to the left. So the left knee will bend and you're going to be in an asymmetrical twist. The right shoulder stays on the floor, the right arm stays on the floor, and this left hand maybe let go because you might be pulling with that left hand, and we don't want to do that. In fact, if anything, put your left hand under your knee and take a little bit of the weight of your right knee into your left hand so you don't feel a collapse in that right hip. However, the right arm is reaching out to the right, creating quite a nice stretch and twist across the chest and waist. Maybe if you like, you can turn your head to the right. If this feels spooky, I should have said this sooner. If it feels a bit spooky in the lower back, slide that left knee up under the right knee so that your legs are in symmetry. Whatever works for your bod right now. And don't forget to breathe. And see if, because of this nice twist, you can access more of those little bronchioli in the right lung. You could imagine maybe you're breathing into the skin of the lung, front, side, and back. And then when you're ready, slide the feet down, foot down, and roll onto your back again. You might be skew width on the mat, try and get symmetrical again. And then just hang around there for a moment and notice the differences between the two sides of your body. And then when you're ready, take your left knee up and hold either the knee or the back of the knee. And take the right leg out flat. And reach that right leg a little longer, but keep the foot relaxed this time. The toes don't have to poke to the ceiling. And let the hands that are holding the knee not yank it towards you, but just anchor it. And think of the knee being slightly pointing towards the left shoulder rather than towards the collarbone or the chest. And breathe and feel that expansion from the back of the left knee down the hamstrings, around the buttock, across the pelvic floor to the right thigh, down to the right knee. Breathe. And then take the left foot vertically to the ceiling while staying, aiming to maintain that knee close to the trunk. So it's like you're squatting or doing a lunge on the ceiling. And breathe there. And we're avoiding, please, any small area of intensity, any small area of pressure in the hip, looking for an even sensation through the whole hip if possible, please. And then take your right arm draped on the floor beside you or out to the side, and straighten the left leg, draping it over to the left a little. So you're kind of doing a sideways stretch of the left leg, but keep your right buttock on the floor, keep your right shoulder and arm on the floor, and breathe. And then bring that leg back to vertical. Bend it a teeny tiny bit and bring your right hand to the outside of your left knee, your left arm draped on the floor, and take that leg across your body without rolling onto your side. So it's not a twist. The right toes are still pointing to the ceiling, the chest is pointing to the ceiling, and the left back of pelvis is connected to the floor. And if you feel like you have it in you to slightly straighten the left leg a bit more, it will be quite intense to do that. So go easy and breathe. Long, slow, full breaths. And then take your left foot down onto your right knee or right thigh, wherever it meets, and roll the two knees over to the floor on the right. The right knee is going to want to bend to make that happen. If it is tricky for your hip, lower back, sacroiliac joint, then bring your right knee up under your left knee so you're in a more symmetrical twist. Let your left arm drape. You want to have your shoulders, two of them on the floor. And what can be nice is to take your right hand under your left knee, just to slightly support that knee. And then breathe into the absolute broad, kind of American football shape of your left lung. Every single part of its huge expanse, quite big, the lungs. Three more deep breaths here. And when you feel ready, roll onto your back again. Get symmetrical if you feel asymmetrical. And just notice what you notice. Allow the body to talk to you. Kind of letting you know whether it's happy with what you've done with it and to it and for it. And then we'll take one foot and then the other off the floor. Hold one knee in each hand nice and wide like a baby on a rug. And draw the knees towards your two armpits. Breathing. Let those ribs really expand. And then just reduce a little the weight of your hands so your knees move away from you just very slightly, where they would stay on their own if you didn't have your hands there. And rock side to side, letting the elbow touch the floor, massaging the lower back on the floor. You're very welcome to roll your head with this so that it's a nice full roll of the whole body. Or you can keep the head facing vertically and then it's a slight twist in the spine. Either way, we're getting a nice little back massage. And then when you're ready, bring your feet to the floor. I'm going to apologize in advance for a little bit of strength work now. Bringing your arms down by your sides. obviously tongue in cheek saying that I'm apologizing, because of course strength work is really valuable, but you know, when we're doing nice gentle practices and then I throw this at you, it can feel like a bit of a shock to the system. If you're wearing socks, you might find that as we progress through this movement that you slip. So just be prepared to just whip your socks off if you need to. Bringing your arms down by your sides and kind of tucking them quite close into your sides, please. Inhale here. And as you exhale, engage your buttocks and pelvic floor and lift your bum up off the floor to a low bridge. And inhale, come slowly down. Exhaling, lifting gently up. Notice if you need to change the angle of your feet, the position of your feet, that's really fine to do so, inhaling down to optimize your ability to do this. 3 more like that. Exhaling up, engaging the glutes, the buttocks, and the pelvic floor, and the hamstrings will happen to be engaged too. Always lift, always exhaling on the most difficult movement. Last one. And then when you get down again, could you slide your feet slightly further away, like maybe the length of half of one of your feet or half of your feet, and lift your toes off the floor. This is going to mean that your hamstrings are going to have to work harder than they did. So it's a really good idea to strengthen the hamstrings as well, as we're all obsessed about stretching them. We're going to exhale and lift with the toes off the floor, those feet slightly further away, and inhale to come down. If this is too much, bring your feet where you need them to make this achievable. Exhale to lift. Inhale to roll down. 2 more in your own time. Think of the tone of your buttocks and hamstrings, pelvic floor also. And the next time you come down, settle your feet in any position that they feel drawn to. And we'll turn that into a yoga bridge. So we're going to inhale here, and as you exhale, lift up. Take your arms under your body as far as they'll go. Tuck your shoulder blades down and in and under. Interlace your fingers and bring your hands back onto the floor, or just hook your thumbs if you can't interlace the fingers. So the hands are kind of held there under you. And then lift your sternum up towards your chin. Lift your pelvis up to the ceiling. Try not to pull your chin down to your chest. Press your arms into the floor and imagine that I'm pushing a tennis ball up between your shoulder blades and you're trying to lift your back away up off the tennis ball. Keep breathing. Stay up in that back bend. So here we're more interested in the extension of the spine and the hips than we are in the strength work, but it does need strength to keep you up there. Inhale here. As you exhale, can you lie down on top of your arms that they're squished there under your back? But once your pelvis lands, please unhook your hands so that you're not lying on interlaced fingers or crossed thumbs. The palms are down, hands are beside one another. And then take your legs out long again. So basically you're lying on your back with your arms hiding as neatly as possible under your body. And for a moment, just work on connecting to your breath again. And thinking of expanding into those bronchioli on your inhale and really tracing the entirety of the exhale. If you try and trace the exhale from the cells of the lungs through those branches back to the trunk of the trachea and over the sinuses and out the nostrils, you will necessarily be creating a longer exhale. And that's another good fast track to reducing stress, is prolonging your exhale. So we've already had 3 little tools you can use to reduce that allostatic load or to manage it. One was the little simple meditation of the stroking of the hands and trying to determine which hand was doing the receiving, which was doing the giving, and really trying to pour all your attention into that. Actually, 3 tools. The other is orientating through the eyes, so just spending time objectively looking at something very simple and non-triggering. And then there was just general deep breathing where you're tracing your breath and making it interesting enough that you have to focus. So that was trying to feel the breath in the nostrils. And then particularly focusing on the exhale is another tool. We're going to try and bring this back bend a little higher now if you can or want to. As you inhale, press down through your elbows and slide the back of your head off the floor so that you come to rest the top of the back of your head on the floor. So you're looking at the wall behind you. You're not trying to look along the floor behind you. You don't need to arch the neck that much. Just so you're maybe resting the weight of your head on that little spirally bit that you see sometimes in the hair, short-haired people. You can see that little spiral where the hair is at the top of the back of the head usually. Press down into the elbows, and please try and allow most of your weight to be on your elbows and your pelvis and hands rather than on your head. Couple more breaths if you're enjoying it. If you're not enjoying it, lift the head slightly to then replace it neutrally on the ground. Try not to slide out of this because you might just strain the back of the neck a little. When you feel ready, lift the weight of the head just enough to return it without pressure, and then take your arms out and let everything just go flat and fluffy on the floor. And notice probably quite a considerable amount of sensation. And then once some of that sensation is dissipated, you might have the ability to come back to thinking about breathing into the entirety of the cells of those lungs, front, back, and sides. And then when you're cooked, bend your knees, roll to your side, and roll onto your belly. And you're welcome to rest down on with your head on your hands, or come up with your head down on flat arms, or come up with your elbows on the floor and your head being held by your hands. And if you are doing this more upright version, well, in either version, actually, just think about softening the shoulders. A bit of shoulder melt. And then if it feels nice to do so, wobble your bum side to side. And don't forget to breathe. And then back to stillness, tuck your toes, lift your knees and tuck your toes a bit further up under your shins kind of thing. And then go for a little walk here with the heels. So we did it lying on our backs. Here we're going on our fronts, like you're trying to press one heel to the wall, press the other heel to the wall. And go for that little walk. It'll feel intense maybe in your toes if you've got stiff toes, it might feel intense in a stretch in the insteps, it might feel intense in the ankles or the calves. You might feel it mostly in your hips. And again, just checking in that the lower back is happy with the range of movement that you're offering. And then release your feet, bring your feet flat. If you have a tendency to cramp, this next movement might make your hamstrings cramp. So because it's really just preparatory for something and there'll be other movements like it, don't do it if you have a tendency to cramp. But if you don't, bend your knees and bring your heels up towards your bum. And we're going to do a couple of little pulses as if you're trying to kick your bum with your heels. So we're going to go kick, kick, and bring the legs down. And we're going to come back up, kick, kick, and bring the legs down. You can rest your lower upper body lower if you want. Kick, kick, bring the legs down. Kick with the heels, kick, bring the legs down. 3 more, kick, kick, bring the legs down, and kick, kick, bring the legs down. Last time, kick, kick, and leave the legs up. And come right up onto your elbows if you can. And see if you can reach back with your right hand to hold your right ankle. If that feels like too much of a journey, don't bother. And there's a joy if you have leggings or socks on that you can hold the cuff of the leggings or socks if you can't reach the foot itself. But try and flex your ankle and hold the ankle rather than the foot, but allow a certain degree of relaxing the heel towards the bum, not pulling, but relaxing the leg. But don't pull with your hand, it's just holding. Breathing. And then simply change sides. I find it much easier to reach that ankle if I'm right up on my elbow rather than down here. So see what it's like. If you find it difficult, see if it helps to come up onto your elbow. And you could even support your head in the hand that's on the floor. And breathe. Flex that left ankle so you're not pulling on the foot, which will end up pulling on the knee. And that may be enough for you, or you may be one of the slightly weird people who are able to hold 2 ankles. I count myself among the slightly weird, by which I mean to say that if you can't, don't think that that means you're crap. It just means that your body doesn't do something that isn't necessary for survival, okay? That's the important thing to remember. That even if you can lie on your belly, you probably can extend your spine enough to survive. And let's reach the heels back if we want to pull the chest off the floor slightly. And some of you may like to lift the thighs off the floor, and that's quite an extreme extension. So go easy, please. And notice if you have any very small areas of compression or intensity, and you want to avoid small areas of compression and intensity and more such a blanket sense of movement and extension. And then very gently release your legs down, your chest down, your feet down, rest your head. And again, you can rest your head down on flat arms, or you can be up on your elbows with slightly elevated head, which can be helpful if you've got larger breasts or you get a bit claustrophobic face down. And then if you can, wobble your arse, your pelvis side to side, as if you're trying to shake off your buttocks off your pelvis. Shake your muscles loose. Don't forget to breathe. No one's watching your wobbly bum. They're all watching mine, if they're watching at all. And then come back to stillness. And just notice how you're doing. And the lovely thing about being on our belly now is that we can spend some time breathing into the back body. So I often talk about that driftwood spine breathing. So that as you inhale, you imagine that your spine is driftwood floating up and down on the waves of your breath. And then when you're ready, take your hands under your shoulders, please tuck your toes and push up onto all fours. And keeping your knees approximately mat width apart, and you're welcome to pleat that mat or fold a blanket to kneel on. It's not that heavy on the knees just yet, but we will be on the knees a couple of times now over the next few minutes. So the knees are quite wide, but the big toes are touching, if you can. Lift your tail like you're trying to do an arch in the spine, and bring your bum back, not to rest on your heels, but as if you're trying to kiss the wall behind you with your sitting bones at a height, so straight back there on a horizontal trajectory rather than down. And then creep your hands forward, and if your spine can remain neutral while you put your head on the floor, do that. If the floor feels very far away, put a block under your head, especially if you have osteoporosis of the spine, because if we let that head drop down to the floor, we're going to be rounding the spine with a fair bit of weight from gravity on the spine. So you want to maintain neutral spine. But what you'll be feeling in this, because of the wideness of the knees, is that there's quite an impact into the hip joints. And that's the intention. And if it's too much in the hips, bring the knees closer. If there's not much sensation in the hips, bring the knees wider. Lift through the tail. Feel that nice expansion for the armpits, I hope. Pretty nice spinal traction. You'd almost imagine that you're dangling from your hands. Like if you were to put this shape upright, you could imagine you were holding a bar with your hands and dangling in space. Such a sense of the arms reaching beyond and the body detaching almost from the hands. And then when you're ready, come back to all fours and bring the knees back to neutral. And if you have yoga bricks, pop them to the top of your mat. And if you don't have bricks, you can use a chair or a stool, a footstool, and you'd be holding the seat of the chair. And then we're going to take our right foot between the blocks. This is where you might need something under your left knee if you don't already have more stuff on your floor other than a yoga mat. And then just shift your weight forward slightly so that some people don't get this feeling, but I find when I shift the weight forward, it's like my kneecap gets pushed back and I feel like I'm less pressuring onto my kneecap directly. Come right up onto your fingertips. I prefer my knuckles, so fingertips or knuckles, so that you're not collapsing down onto those blocks. And maybe close your eyes, but definitely breathe and tune into the sensations in your hips. And you don't want to allow the hips to collapse to the floor. So if anything, think more that you're trying to rise up off your hips, like you're trying to lift the weight of your trunk off your hips and pelvis. And breathe. Tuck the back toes. Keep breathing. And as you exhale, push backwards into the left foot, like you're trying to again imprint your heel on the wall behind you. And then inhale, relax that. Exhale, press down into the right foot. Inhale, relax that. Exhale, push back into the left foot. The toes are curled. Inhale, relax. Exhale, push down into the right foot. Sense of lift in the pelvic floor and lift in the lower abdomen between the pubic bone and the navel, zipping up. Inhale, relax. Now we're going to exhale and press back through the left foot and down through the right foot, lifting through the pelvic floor and a sense of zipping up some hipster jeans from the pubic bone just to halfway up to the navel. And inhale, relax. We'll do that one more time. Pressing down through the right foot, pushing back through the left, zipping up the lower abdomen between pubic bone and navel and lifting through the pelvic floor. Probably tired in the legs now. Let's walk the hands back, take the blocks with you into a sort of half splits position. Right toes to the ceiling, thinking of the two buttocks going straight down evenly rather than draping down towards the left more than the right. And then walking your blocks forward again, coming back into your lunge, tucking your toes if they've untucked, and staying as low as you can in space. Lift the left knee off the floor. So try not to bob up the bum behind you, just extending the heel back. Beautifully done. Yeah, fabulous. Reaching through the instep so that you're not rolling into the little toes of the left leg. Breathing. And as the left knee starts to come back down to the floor, think of it going backwards as well as down, as if you're trying to touch your toes with your left knee as you bring it down. It can be quite intense in the quadriceps, the front of the hip. And then slide that right leg back. And we're going to simply change sides. You might need to sort of sit up, kneel up in order to get that foot to the top of the mat. That's fine, especially if you have osteoporosis. It's that movement of the leg up that might create that sharp rounding of the spine. So once you get the foot there, you can bring the hands back to the block. And just hang out there for a minute, maybe sliding forward slightly so the kneecap is not so ferociously squished onto the floor. And then a little sense of lifting up off the blocks, lifting up off your legs, like you're just trying to touch, again, that little circular bit of hair, the top of the back of the head, as if that's trying to reach the ceiling. And then tuck the back toes. On your next exhale, push back through the right heel. It'll engage the leg, it'll also stretch the toes and the calf, but it's more that I'm looking for the muscular effect. Inhale to relax. Exhale, press the left foot down, and you might find more natural engagement of the pelvic floor and lower abdomen as you work that front foot. Inhale, relax, soften the jaw. How can you reduce your allostatic load while working this hard? Exhale, push back through the right foot. It is through things like maintaining deep breath, relaxing the face, inhaling to relax. Exhale, left foot, but also kind of your attitude towards the work. Can you work hard without getting all discombobulated and exhausted? Finding that good level. Exhale, push back through the right foot. A little bit of tone in the pelvic floor and the lower front of the abdomen. Inhaling, relax. Exhale, press down through the left foot and push back through the right, lifting the pelvic floor, zipping up from pubic bone to navel. Inhale, relax. Mind your jaw, mind your shoulders and forehead. Exhale, press down through the left, push back through the right foot. Inhale, relax. One more time, work with the legs while lifting through the pelvic floors. If you're picking a tissue up from a box with your vagina right now, zipping up the lower abdomen. Inhale, relax. I'm exhausted. Walk your feet back. Whatever those things, hands and blocks back into that little gentle half splits. Sitting the two buttocks straight back and down. Try and maintain neutral spine if you can. So that means, yes, lovely, lifting the chest forward. The left toes can be off the floor. So it's hard to try and point the left toes here. That would be, oh, well, maybe depends on you, actually. I prefer the toes lifted. And then walk the blocks back. Tuck the back toes. Inhale here. Exhale, extend the right heel back to lift the right knee without bobbing up in space. And though the hands are going to be heavier on the blocks now, try not to lean too ferociously onto them for the sake of your wrists, but also for the sake of taking some of the work into the lower body. Inhale here, and on your next exhale, bring your right knee down, reaching it backwards towards your right toes as you bring it down. Don't forget to breathe. And then take your left knee back, past your blocks to the side, and come onto your palms of your hands up towards the top of your mat, tuck your toes, and come into a face down dog. As long as that feels like a rest, and if it doesn't feel like a rest, either do puppy, which is kneeling dog, so you've got the spine, or you can hold a table or a windowsill or a chair or whatever and do a more upright face down dog. Like it to feel pleasant, achievable, and a place where you can have a little recalibration through your own choice of movement or stillness and reconnecting to the breath. And then when you're ready, clamber down onto all fours again. And come back into an osteoporosis friendly child's pose, which means the bum comes back towards the heels only if you can do it while maintaining a sense of lift in the tail and neutral lumbar spine. If you can't do that, then pop a block under your bum. And then the head comes down to a block or your hands so that you don't end up dropping the head and rounding the upper spine. Remember, with osteoporosis, that's the middle and upper back that are more prone to vulnerability and fracture than the very lower vertebrae, even though osteoporosis will be present there, just because that's the part of the body that rounds more easily, and so there's going to be more pressure. So maintaining that length of the front body, very important. And just rest here for a minute. We're not going to spend a huge amount of time here. Oh, and by the way, if you can't manage to do this even with blocks, then you could lie on your back and hug your knees, or you could lie on your side, or you could lie on your belly. Three more deep breaths here. And then when you're ready, we're going to use some of our nice yoga props. So what you need, well, first thing is that you're going to need to be warm. We won't be getting any warmer. Moving towards our restorative somatic section. Well, it's been somatic really. The yoga bolster might work for some of you and not for others. And a great alternative for this one, I've got a pillow that's basically in a bolster shaped cover, which is really helpful because it's lower, but it's still got that length and a little bit more firmness than a normal cushion. But a normal cushion is fine too. But if you can kind of get it a bit squished, so it's a little elongated, and then you can tie it up maybe with a dressing gown strap, or I've got a pashmina to tie mine up here, just to show you that it's possible. And then if none of those things work, you can roll up your yoga mat and just make sure you've got something else warm under you. So whatever you're using, I'm going to show you with just the common or garden cushion. You have your common or garden cushion across towards the top-ish of your mat. It might be halfway between the top and the middle. And then at the top of your mat, you might want another cushion or a yoga brick, but you might end up not needing them. Actually, I'm going to bring my camera down lower so that you're more definitely able to see some of the detail. So you'll be coming onto your right hip, and you will be lying down with whatever structure you've created for yourself under your ribs at about nipple height. So I definitely, in classes, I would definitely notice that some people have the bolster or the cushion right down under their waist. That's not where we want it. And then others would have it up under the armpit, which is also where we don't want it. We want it under the side of the ribs. And then the right arm drapes out in front of you so that the shoulder ends up falling off the far end of the cushion. And some of you may be perfectly happy to have your head all the way down to the floor. You can see that my neck angle is quite awkward there. So I think I need a little elevation today, and other days I might not. It just depends on your upper back flexibility at the time. You bend the knees up in front of the hips approximately, and then take the left arm overhead, and the fingertips are just touching the floor. Now, if your shoulder finds that tricky, you can either, and this is really nice to do, put another block or cushion at the top for your hand to rest on. And if that still isn't enough, just drape your hand more in front on a diagonal in front of your head, because you really don't want to be in pain in the shoulder girdle or the shoulder joint. Now, if you find that the squishy cushion is not enough, I'll show you what it looks like with the bolster. It's quite a lot more dramatic. It's the same thing. It's in the side ribs at about nipple height. And we're trying to let that shoulder fall off the other side. The other mistake that sometimes gets made in class is that the shoulder stays up on the bolster, and it's quite awkward, kind of flappy situation with that right hand. And that's not the idea. Really trying to let that shoulder drape off the other side. If the thing that's under your ribs is too high, you might find your right hip lifting off the floor, and you can, in fact, put a cushion under your right hip if you don't have anything low enough to facilitate this. So basically, you're just looking for some way to create a side extension. The sides of the vertebrae moving apart, the ribs moving apart. And again, just a reminder that if having the arm overhead is really troublesome, you might have rotator cuff or frozen shoulder stuff, bring that support or just the hand more on a diagonal in front of your face or forward. And then the idea is to be, I would say, 99.9% comfortable with just an interesting sensation along the top side of the body. I would say maybe 100% comfortable with an interesting sensation. Just depends on your definition of comfort. So for someone there's this much expansion, it can feel exposing a little bit. So that energetic exposure is fine, but just don't tolerate any pain. One last little thing to check is, are you tending to roll to your back, or are you tending to roll a bit to your front? Try and be very much on the side seam of your body, of your clothing. And breathe a lot, getting right into those bronchioli. So just being here at this session will be reducing your allostatic load and helping you come into the parasympathetic, which should support your sleep as well. Bit of a win-win situation. Let's stay here for another 8 breaths or so, aiming for those breaths to be nice and long. And then when you're ready, slide that left arm back to somewhere more neutral. And when you're ready, push yourself up onto your hip. We're going to stay on the same hip. We're going to rearrange our props. So whatever you've had a crossways under you, can you put it more lengthways? And if possible, have it the top end of it a bit higher than the near end of it. So it might be that you want two cushions towards the top and one towards the bottom if you're using cushions. And you sit that hip right up at the end of that set of props, so it's already touching your right hip. Keep the knees together to start and put your hands on either side of the cushions or bolster. Lift your chest, so you've got a nice long front of trunk. Turn towards the bolster or cushions and lay your belly and your chest down on it. Elbows come up and rest on the floor under your shoulders, and then turn to rest on your right cheek onto the cushions or bolster. And then check in if you feel happy in your lower back and your hips. And if you do, you can slide your left knee backwards till it rests in the instep of your right foot. So you've created that asymmetry in the legs again, like when we did our twist earlier on. So the left knee slides back into the instep of the right foot. That may be too much for you, in which case bring the knees back together and just allow yourself to rest there. If at some point while we rest here in this little twist, your neck frees up and you're able to rest on your left cheek instead, you can go ahead and do that so that you're in a more complete twist. Just in terms of osteoporosis, try and make sure that you're not rounding and then twisting. So think of being long in the front body so that the spine is pretty neutral. What you're thinking about in terms of osteoporosis protection is that you're not squishing the fronts of the vertebrae together. So if you have that space in the front of the spine, then you're free to twist. Whereas if the vertebrae are squished together because you're rounded and then you add a twist, that's going to be pretty harsh. So you're aiming for that long spine, and one way you can help that happen is by elevating the top of your cushions a bit higher. So it's easier for you to land there, to get there. You don't have to round to get there. And we're going to settle here as well for another, say, 10 breaths, which is likely to be about 2 minutes for you. When you're doing restorative yoga poses, if you can't surrender your weight, if you're kind of holding yourself up off the posture, then it's not going to be restorative for you. The idea of these postures is that we are able to give up our weight.
And I suggest you bring the knees together if they're apart, and that takes some of the intensity out. And then carefully turn your head back towards the knees if your head is turned away. And just take a moment in that more natural position. And then when you're ready, push yourself up and we'll do those two things on the other side. You can probably just clamber onto all fours and then sit down onto your left hip. Rearrange the cushion of both are sideways. Lie down on your left side with the shoulder higher and the left arm draped out. And then resting the head on something if it's falling down at a very sharp angle. The knees are together for this one. The bolster cushion is at about nipple height, and then the right arm comes overhead and either rests on a support or on the floor. You can have something under the hip if your prop is quite high, just to take the edge off it. And don't forget, you can also choose to make a lower support. And just double check that you're not lying a little bit towards your chest or a little bit towards your back. But if you take a little rock backwards and forwards to make sure you're on your side of your ribs. And that the neck doesn't feel uncomfortable. If you don't have your head on the floor, sorry, if you don't have your head on the block, but the floor is too far away, but you don't quite want to be elevated, you can scrumple up a bit of blanket in under the side of your neck. That can be a really helpful way of doing that kind of support as well. And again, remember that if that arm doesn't want to go overhead, you can rest it on a diagonal in front of your face, just trying to keep a bit of length in the right side of the body. And we'll take 8 more breaths there. A little addition on this side, just to think about the lengthening of the distance between the hip and the armpit as you inhale, and a sort of settling back as you exhale. Relaxing your jaw. Lengthening your breath. And when you're ready, take that right arm down. Push yourself up onto your left hip. And angle the cushion away from you on a right angle so that one end of it is touching your hip And the other end of it is preferably a little higher. Bring your hands either side of the cushion, turn your chest and belly towards the cushion, try and put your navel and chest onto it and rest down on your left cheek initially. And if at any point you're able to turn away and rest the right cheek either, you're welcome to do that. But also check in whether you want to slide that right knee back to nestle it into the instep of your left foot. Keep your elbows on the floor. If they don't reach the floor, you need to put some cushions under the elbows or make your prop lower. And we're endeavoring to be in neutral spine here, a nice bit of length between the pubic bone and the navel, length between the navel and the sternum. And breath. I'm sure that your attention will be brought away from your breath on multiple occasions. Just try maybe to count another 8 breaths or so, and that may help you to stay connected. And when you've done those breaths, bring your knees together. Carefully turn your head back to neutral, back to face the knees. And as you lie there on your side, just think about what position you might like to finish in. And you might like to finish with your legs up on the sofa or your legs up on the wall, which is really nice if you've had tired legs or if you're feeling a bit bloated and you might think your lymphatics might be a bit sluggish, or it can be a nice preparation for sleep. Or you might like to do a reclining cobbler, a back bend, which might be nice to do after having crumpled up our spines a little bit and after having been asymmetrical in the spine. So reclining cobbler would be to use the same cushions that you already had, and you would sit at the end of it and lie down backwards over that cushion. And then you would want a cushion under each knee to support your legs with wide knees and the soles of the feet together. Or you can bring your blanket or whatever you've got under you towards the wall and go in sideways to the wall, reverse your bum in. And then roll onto your side, onto your back, bring your legs up onto the wall. If you're very far from the wall, you might find your knees lock because of the diagonal lines. If you're far from the wall and you can't scooch in, put something behind your legs so that your knees have something to rest on, so they're not locked straight into sort of hyperextension. And you want to be able to rest as symmetrically as you can, whatever position you're in. You don't feel any twist or awkwardness in the body anywhere. So this should be very relaxing. I'll be leaving you while you're in this position eventually, so I won't be bringing you out of it, because the joy is that you can stay in your own home, chilling out. So I will just disappear in a couple of minutes, so I'll say goodbye now, but I'm going to read you a little poem. Bye. I'll read you a little poem in the meantime, when I can find it. Excuse me. So here is a poem you might like, speaking of reducing our allostatic load. And it's called The Peace of Wild Things. And it's by Wendell Berry. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May you be well. May you be free from harm. May you progress where possible. May you find ways to sit at ease with the rest. And may all beings know peace. Om Shanti, Namaste. When you do come to take yourself out of your restful posture, do so by increments. Spend time maybe looking around your room, spend time mooching about a little bit of movement, spend time on your side, spend time sitting before you get on with your day. Thank you and rest well.